After Penn State embarrasses themselves against UCLA and Oregon getting all the hype for beating them in Happy Valley, I'm not so sure the Ducks deserve all the hype and the love they're getting ahead of their matchup with Indiana this weekend.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, and it is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. Well, thank you so much for being here, truly making this your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. And we get you started on another Monday, another big week of college football coming up. We had a cream and crimson scrimmage we'll talk about for Indiana basketball, some highlights and things from there. I took some notes, and I'm really excited for what that team could be. Plus, we have the new AP poll out for college football, and in comparison to the coaches poll, it may actually be right with two top 10 teams no longer in the rankings. But we start with this idea. Ahead of a top 10 matchup between Oregon and Indiana, the Ducks and your Hoosiers, there are people saying that Oregon doesn't deserve all the hype and the love and might be overrated heading into this matchup. And I kind of see where they're coming from, right? Because you start to break down this Oregon resume and you start to look at what Dan Lanning and the Ducks have accomplished this season. You have a couple of non-conference, non-P4 games that everybody has, right? Indiana, of course, has 3 of them. But a win against Oklahoma State, who's one of the worst P4 programs in the country and moved on from Mike Gundy, I'm not really impressed. A win over Oregon State, who might be one of the worst P4 programs in the country, even though, is that still considered a rivalry with Oregon? I doubt it, because of how just different those programs are, one successful and one clearly not. And then a win over Northwestern, they're probably the second worst team in the Big Ten. And then there's this game against Penn State. And that's where everybody circled that game. It was one of the biggest of the year so far. And at the time, just a couple of weeks ago, it was a huge win for the Ducks. Right? They go into Happy Valley. It's the whiteout. It's a night game, and they escape with a double overtime victory, game-sealing interception, and Oregon is all of a sudden just this world beater, best team in college football. But we just saw Penn State go on the road to Los Angeles and lose to UCLA, to a team who was 0-4. Folks, do you know that in the history of college football, an 0-4 team has never beat a top 10 team in the country? Never. They've never done it until this past weekend, where James Franklin's narrative of winning big games held true last week. Now he can't even win easy games against UCLA, winless programs who just cleaned out their coaching staff. So I say all of this to say I think Oregon is a good football team. I think they're a really good football team. I think Dan Lanning's one of the best coaches in the country. And I think his young quarterback, and Dante Moore, is playing extremely well. But that win over Penn State may not have been the litmus test we thought it was to determine how good this Oregon team could be. Because you go back to what preseason rankings and preseason predictions and things like that were saying about Oregon. Yeah, they expected them to be that third team out of the Big Ten. They've quickly become, I think, the second team in the Big Ten as of right now because they beat Penn State, and you're kind of waiting on some others to come up, right? Ohio State's the best. Then there's probably Oregon. Then there's a bunch of teams like Indiana, who's clearly third, and a bunch of teams after them like a Michigan or a Washington or an Illinois, if you want to go that far as well. I'm just saying we need to pump the brakes a little bit until we see Oregon this weekend against the Indiana Hoosiers. I think that's the real test. I think that's where you'll find out how good this Oregon team is. And of course, for us from the Indiana perspective, we're going to find out exactly how good the Indiana Hoosiers are. But I feel Indiana's been a little bit more tested up to this point. You played a tough game against Illinois. Well, let me say this. You played a game against Illinois, who we thought was a tough team, and you blew them out of the water. And then you went on the road to Iowa and got a tough win. You didn't look good doing it, but you did it. right? You went in, got the win, and got out. Indiana's been tested, and I put that in quotations because Illinois was still a good team. Indiana just made them look bad. You've been tested twice if you're the Hoosiers against quality competition. Oregon's been tested once. Again, Oklahoma State, Oregon State, I'm not giving you credit for those. I'm not. Those are bad teams that Oregon is clearly more talented than. And then you beat Penn State, and that win just got a whole lot worse this past Saturday. So I think it tells me, and hopefully tells the college football world, that Oregon is still good, but they have more to prove. And that gives Indiana a really good shot to go in and win this football game on Saturday and pull off the upset, because that's what it is. They're ranked third. Indiana's ranked seventh. Again, more talk on the AP poll in just a moment. But you're about a 9.5, 10-point underdog, at least with the opening lines with our friends at FanDuel. It is an upset. You are the underdog if you're Indiana, but I feel you've been more tested than them. I just believe that. And I think Indiana will have a chip on their shoulder. I think Indiana will take that experience and have a pretty good game plan against the Oregon Ducks, who, again, don't get this misconstrued. They are a good football team. They're averaging over 500 yards a game on offense, and it's a pretty equal split passing and rushing. Dante Moore, again, playing really good football, doesn't turn it over, has, 14 passing touchdowns this season. They've got an army of running backs and receivers that they use, and their defense is pretty legit. You saw it against Penn State. But I think that said more about the Nittany Lions offense than it did the Oregon defense. Just look at what UCLA was able to do. And so I say all of that to say this. Oregon is good, but I think a little overrated for right now. And that win against Penn State means nearly nothing to me anymore. This weekend is when we'll know how good the Oregon Ducks are and how good your Indiana Hoosiers are. Winner will be well on their way to representing in the Big Ten championship game and one of the 2 or 3 teams from the Big Ten in the college football playoff. And for us in Indiana, even if you don't win, which I still think we can, a competitive game here will show both sides just how good they are. But until I see it from Oregon this Saturday against Indiana's offense and Indiana's defense, I'm just not buying all the hype on the Ducks just yet. But they have every chance to prove it this weekend in their home stadium with a top 10 matchup as Indiana comes to town. All right, coming up here on Locked On Hoosiers, we'll stick with football for now. We'll talk some of the new AP poll rankings and how Oregon actually moved down after a bye week. Indiana moves up after a bye week, and 2 preseason top 10 teams are no longer ranked. We talk about that coming up next here on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs, with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. I love how the Peloton IQ system offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights for you, and corrects your form, so making every rep safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. Welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. And hopefully those of you on YouTube have noticed the new addition to our podcast set over here, huh? How'd you like that? That's a brand new picture. That's from the Indiana-Illinois game, that big-time top 25 matchup a couple of weeks ago. That picture I thought was pretty sweet. So fills the space nicely in the podcast setup. And so if you're on audio, just check it out on our YouTube page, and you can go and see the new addition there. But I think it looks sweet, and it'll be a nice reminder of the biggest home game in Indiana football history, Memorial Stadium history, and the Hoosiers dominate that game. Really cool to see that, and we're going to have that there moving forward. But sticking with football here on Locked On Hoosiers, the newest AP poll dropped yesterday, and I'll be honest, when the coaches poll came out, right, that came out, about an hour or so before, maybe 30, 45 minutes, I saw that, And there were some questionable things in there, like Penn State still being ranked 22nd, according to the coaches across college football. And I was like, no way we're doing this, right? I said, no way we're going to have Penn State still ranked as a top 25 team. Thankfully, and shockingly, the AP poll did not rank the Penn State Nittany Lions. They also didn't rank the Texas Longhorns, which are two preseason top 10 teams. Believe they were preseason top 5 teams that are no longer ranked as we head into week 7 of the college football season. That's wild, folks. That is truly incredible to see. But let's be real. Those two teams don't deserve to be ranked. You want to know how many combined Power 4 wins that Texas and Penn State have in the 2025 season? How many combined Power 4 victories the Texas Longhorns and the Penn State Nittany Lions have in 2025 combined? 0. They have none. They haven't done it. Texas lost to Florida this weekend. Penn State lost to UCLA. So good for the AP poll voters. I haven't said that much, but good for them for doing what was right and not ranking those two teams. Now, there are some interesting things. As I mentioned, Oregon drops 1 after not playing. Indiana moves up 1 after not playing. And so you do have a top 10 matchup in Eugene this weekend with the Indiana Hoosiers and the Oregon Ducks. Oregon ranked 3, Indiana ranked at 7. And look, I think it is very safe to say that Ohio State is the best team in the country right now. They did what they needed to do against Minnesota, which is fine. Miami looks solid. That was a good win over Florida State. I understand why they jumped Oregon, but I don't love it. But it is what it is. Ole Miss at 4, A&M at 5, Oklahoma 6. There's your Indiana Hoosiers at 7. You start looking down at other Big Ten teams that are ranked in the AP poll. Michigan at 15, quietly working their way up. Illinois moves up 5 spots to 17. And then that is it for the Big Ten. So still a top-heavy conference, but the Indiana Hoosiers ranked 7th in the AP poll, and they absolutely should be. I think there's an argument they're a top 5 team in college football, but I'll wait until we see what happens this weekend against the Oregon Ducks, which is an awesome opportunity, right? That's something that we are going to talk about all week here on the show, is the fact that Indiana is about to play in one of the biggest games of its program's history. Think about that for a second. We talked about the Illinois game, right? The picture behind us, how that was one of the biggest home games you've ever had. But now you're about to play on one of the biggest games that Indiana football has ever represented itself in. A top 10 game in conference, and you're going on the road to do it. College game day is going to be there. Everybody's going to be watching this game. It's a 3:30 kick Eastern time on CBS. Anybody with a television set across America can turn it on at 3:30 on Saturday and watch the Indiana Hoosiers play in the heart of the day. That's big time news, man. That's really, really cool. And, you know, for a team like Ohio State or Oregon, who's always there, who's been there forever, this doesn't mean that much to them. The fans don't care that they're playing in the middle of the afternoon where everybody can watch. This is just another Saturday for them. But the Indiana Hoosiers have a chance to prove something, because there are people who still doubt Indiana. Same way I'm kind of doubting Oregon, and a lot of other people are as well. There's a lot of people doubting the Hoosiers. Absolutely. There are people who aren't impressed with a win over Illinois, who has struggled in their last few games, even though they beat a ranked USC team and had to hold off Purdue. They definitely had to do that. And then there's people who aren't impressed with what the Hoosiers did on the road at Iowa, because Iowa's a mediocre team, middle of the pack in the Big Ten, but you went on the road and got it done. So as much as Oregon has something to prove this weekend to folks like me, Indiana has something to prove this weekend to pretty much everybody in college football, because I haven't seen the outpouring support for Curt Cignetti and the Hoosiers. Have you? I haven't seen it. I've seen a lot more hate. I've seen a lot more denial. I've seen a lot more refusing to believe that Indiana's a good football team, right? That Fernando Mendoza is one of the best quarterbacks in the country, who's led his team to a top 10 ranking, that the defense is one of the best in the nation under Coach Shanahan or Coach Haynes, and the fact that they continue to make big play after big play and hold people off the scoreboard. Nobody wants to talk about that. They just want to deny the fact that the Hoosiers are good and that now they're going to be in the national spotlight. And so you're the 7th ranked team in the country. The highest you've ever been is 4. The highest you ever got to last year was 5. You win this game this weekend, you'll be in the top 5 easily. The teams ahead of you, Oklahoma, they play Texas this weekend in the Red River, so that'll be exciting. Texas A&M, can't remember who they play, or Ole Miss. I need to look at those two teams. But if you beat Oregon this weekend, you will be a top 5 team in the country, the Indiana Hoosiers. But speaking of Penn State, for just a second to go back to that, since again, they're not ranked in the AP poll, which is accurate, how much more winnable does that game look? That game looks a whole lot more manageable now, doesn't it? Problem with that is, yes, it looks more winnable, and it looks like you have every chance to pull that off, but you may not get as much credit for doing so. There's a chance James Franklin's not even the head coach when that game rolls around, which is a wild statement to think about, but it could be true. Problem is, he's got a $40+ million buyout, and yeah, I don't know if they're going to pull that trigger or not, but that game does look a whole lot better. And it looks like Indiana will have every chance to win that game no matter what time of the day it is in Happy Valley. So that's what makes this game even more important, because you start looking at Indiana's schedule just from that perspective here as I get it pulled back up. You start looking at it from that perspective of how many more chances, right, does Indiana have? How many more opportunities to build that resume for those in the college football playoff committee? Because that's what they want to see. That's what they want to look at. They want to see who'd you beat, where'd you beat them, when'd you beat them, that type of thing. This is your biggest remaining opportunity if you're Indiana. It's this weekend against the Oregon Ducks, because now you've got Michigan State next week, UCLA next week, Maryland the following week, then Penn State, then Wisconsin, and then Purdue. As it stands right now, this is Indiana's last ranked matchup. And now we're right back to where we started last year with only 2 or 3 ranked games on the schedule. Indiana didn't win them a year ago. You're off to a nice start this year by beating Illinois. You've got to pull this off. And I think not to put more pressure on this game, but because of the AP poll, because of the rankings and the teams that are on your schedule who have maybe over or underperformed, now you're running out of chances to get those big bolstering wins to stack on top of the ones that you need to take care of business in as well. That's where this is kind of shifted this week. And so keep that in mind as we get closer to kickoff between Indiana and Oregon, and a top 10 game on the road where both teams look like 2 of the best in the country. And my goodness, what an opportunity this is for Indiana to take down Oregon, to get a top 5 win and become a top 5 team in the country. Then you have nobody who can doubt this team. Nobody that can doubt this program. That is what's up for grabs this weekend. That's what's on the line for Indiana when they head out to Eugene, and the whole country's going to get to watch. And good for game day too, for missing out the first time when they should have been in Bloomington when Illinois was here. They're making up for it because they want to go to Oregon, not because of Indiana. Don't be fooled by that. But they'll give the Hoosiers their flowers. They have to. They don't have a choice. And if Indiana can pull off that win and that upset, my goodness, everything lays out for you to be an undefeated team. If you don't slip up, right? Maryland looks sneaky good now. UCLA, maybe. I don't know. Since they've fired everybody and apparently can beat Penn State now. But you focus on the Ducks and a top 10 game, and it's your last good chance to build that resume to make a run at the college football playoff. All right, coming up in our final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers, we're going to flip over to basketball because 2 really cool events last week. The Hoosier hooped on Kirkwood downtown, and then the Cream and Crimson scrimmage. We'll talk about that, some takeaways as well right after this here on the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Square. This episode is brought to you by Square, your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There are certain businesses that make the neighborhood, well, the neighborhood. These are the places that become an extension of home, whether it's the sports bar dedicated to your team's fan base, the spot with the best wings in town for game day, or that beloved local chain that's been rooted in your community for years. These businesses are what bring people together. When neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrive. Some examples of places you can go that work through Square that you can go and support right now. How about Card Craze, if you're into that sort of thing, Cedar Hill Catering, Bloomington Bagel Company, Owen Vallon Winery, and so much more. Those are the places who run through Square, and you need to go support them right now. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot right now. You'll be able, and happy that you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Did you get in on the craziness of NFL Sunday yesterday? Hopefully you did, but if you missed out, Monday Night Football tonight, Thursday Night Football coming up this week, and a whole another slate of college and NFL football coming up this weekend. You can bet on players, on teams, put together parlays. You can live bet on there. If you think a team is coming back to win, jump on FanDuel. See if you can make some money off of your predictions. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app and get started. Go to FanDuel.com. All right, final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers. Again, appreciate you being here, all my everydayers. You know who you are, audio, video, however you find us. Thank you so much for being here, man. October is off to an incredible start, and you are the reason for that. So thank you so much for supporting this show any way that you do and truly being a Hoosiers fan, but a fan of Locked On Hoosiers as well. So final segment here on today's show, and want to talk a little basketball because last week was really cool, right? Indiana has ramped up their events and their, not coverage, but I guess just their exposure is a good word for it, to allow fans to be around the program, to kind of get hyped up as we're about a month, literally a month away from the start of Indiana basketball, which is crazy to think about in the heart of college football season right now. But we tip off in less than a month on the first week of November. And so it's been really cool to see Darian Devries and the Indiana basketball program lean into the community, lean into the fans, and do some things that, let's be real, the previous regime just didn't do. And the first one was the event late last week, the Hoosier Hoops on Kirkwood. That looked awesome. I wasn't able to be there, but it looked incredible. I mean, the students showed up. You had DeVries handing out free drinks to people standing there or buying people beers, and you had Sisley hit the bank shot from up top. I mean, it looked really, really cool. And those are the things that just get people excited about Hoosier basketball again, since the program just hasn't been winning games. And you've seen that from different coaches across the country who have stepped in to make a program great, right? Look at Dan Hurley at UConn. He does stuff like that. Look at Bruce Pearl when he was at Auburn. He did stuff like that. There are so many coaches that have stepped in and realized, if I put my face out there and my name out there and we do these different events to get the fans involved, they'll have a bigger buy-in. And that sounds wild to say that about Indiana basketball fans because they're some of the most loyal fans in the country to any sport at any level, right? We know that and how important it is, but you've got to get them excited about it again. Plain and simple. And that's what that event did. That's what the Cream and Crimson scrimmage did. You've got the Halloween thing coming up too. I mean, there's a lot of different events going on for fans to be a part of. And that's really refreshing to see from head coach Darian Devries and his entire staff. And so the Kirkwood event was awesome. But then there was also the actual scrimmage, the Cream and Crimson scrimmage, which is what everybody wants to see and wants to see actual basketball, right? The Kirkwood thing was just come out, let's have some fun and get involved. This was, hey, let's play some 5-on-5 basketball and let's see what's going on. Saw a bunch of different highlights and videos and things, and I wrote down some of my takeaways that I want to share with you here quickly. Tucker DeVries is going to be the workhorse of this team. I've been saying that since he got here, since he was the first transfer addition when Darren took the job, his father. Tucker is going to be your workhorse. He's going to be the one when you need a bucket, you go to him. I think there are several guys who have that ability on this team, but Tucker is going to be the heart and soul of this basketball team, along with Lamar Wilkerson, who I'm sure you saw some of the highlights, or maybe some of you were there and got to see it live. Lamar Wilkerson's 3-point range is kind of nasty. Like, this dude's going to be pulling up sometimes from the logo, and I think it's going to be okay. I think he'll have the green light to do it because he's just that talented. Right. So I think his range is wild. I think he's going to be a very hot 3-point shooter, not necessarily streaky, but a guy who I've noticed takes a lot of shots. Right. He did when he was at Sam Houston. He did so when we were in Puerto Rico, and he's done so already, especially in this Cream and Crimson scrimmage, too. Just a guy that he's looking to shoot. And if you give him a little bit of airspace, he's going to let it fly. But I'd much rather have someone who's willing to take a three than what we had last year with everybody who was scared to take a three. So I think Lamar Wilkerson's range is going to be pretty exciting. The offense seemed to always be moving. And my goodness, how refreshing is that? When the basketball's on the right wing, 2 players on the left side of the floor are moving and doing things. Somebody's cutting down the baseline. Somebody's setting a back screen. Somebody's coming off that screen to go set an opposite screen in the corner to get somebody open. The offense always is moving, rather than what you saw last year where it was just stationary, where 3 guys sat flat-footed outside the paint or outside the arc. 2 guys stood on the low block, and the point guard has the basketball at the top, and you just wait for something to happen with a high pick and roll. This offense is going to look different. It's going to create more opportunities. It's going to create more shooting, shooting opportunities. Yeah, for lack of a better word. You're just going to have more chances to score and more unique ways to score. And when the ball is moving, the defense is moving. And when the players are moving, the defense is also moving. And when the defense is moving, that creates holes, that creates miscommunication, and that creates open shooting lanes. Whether it's into the lane for a layup or an alley-oop, which Indiana did a lot of, by the way, wrote that down as well, where they're always willing to make the extra pass. Get the defense moving, and you're going to have opportunities to score. And that's what this offense is going to be able to do. I was impressed the few times Tatum Connerway had the basketball in his hands, just from a comfort standpoint. Seems very controlled, very relaxed, one that I think you want the basketball in his hands and is going to be able to create from pretty much anywhere on the floor. The one that stands out to me a couple of times where he dribbles into the lane, kind of gets stuck, but the extra defender comes over because he has that mid-range ability, and then he makes that extra pass. He finds the open man because Indiana's offense is moving, right? They're finding the gaps in the defense. Connerway is able to make that pass, and he's willing to make that pass. I think he's going to be an important player on this Indiana team. Trent Sisley continues to impress, continues to show that I think he'll be one of the best freshmen in college basketball this season. You may not get to see the full effect of him because he won't be a starter right out of the gate like you would see at Duke or Kentucky or things like that. But Trent Sisley is legit. And I'm sticking by my narrative that I said way back in the spring. There's a path for Trent Sisley to be a starter on this Indiana team at some point this season as a freshman. I think that is a legitimate possibility for him to be a starter for the Hoosiers come conference play. It would take a lot and maybe an injury or something, and by no means am I wishing for that, but I think he's going to be playing at a starter caliber, and it's going to be hard to keep him off the floor. So really excited for Trent Sisley. And then Reed Bailey, if he's able to get downhill, like I saw him do a couple of times in the Cream and Crimson scrimmage, with the basketball in his hands from the wing or from that high post, and be able to put it on the floor and work his way to the rack and not pick up offensive fouls, then he's going to be really dangerous. And so there's a lot of positives to take away from this scrimmage. These are obviously very offensive heavy. Defense, there were some plays, but I focus more on the offensive things that I saw, which is where I think Indiana's looking to improve the most. Defense will be fine. This team will be good defensively, at least sound. I know the size isn't really there, but they'll be fundamentally sound on defense because that's what Darian Devries does. But a lot of interesting offensive notes that I was able to take from the highlights I was able to gather. And so really pumped for the start of Indiana basketball as we're just about a month away from that. Football continues to roll on, and I appreciate you being here on Locked On Hoosiers, but we are out of time on today's episode. But don't you worry, we're back tomorrow in a full week of previewing Indiana and Oregon, the top 10 matchup in college football this Saturday afternoon out in Eugene, Oregon. Our buddy Spencer McLaughlin's going to be joining us quite a bit. We'll be having a lot of fun this week week, previewing the Ducks and the Hoosiers. So this is where you want to be, Locked On Hoosiers on YouTube and on audio as well. Okay, we are back tomorrow for another episode, Hoosier fans. So until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.